Number 8. Cyclops skulls. Fans of Greek mythology know all about the Cyclops, but could the recent discovery of strange skulls in the Philippines be proof that these one-eyed monsters once actually existed? A number of skulls with a single eyeball socket squarely in the middle of their foreheads were found in limestone caves in the country's southern islands. Local folklore from native tribes tells tales of giants that once roamed the plains of central and northern Mindanao. According to legends from the Bukidnon, who were highlanders of the Philippines, a group of one-eyed giants thought of as heroes fought against the first Spanish conquistadors to protect the land. They sound remarkably similar to the Cyclops, a race of one-eyed giants described in various Greek myths as everything from fearsome monsters to cannibals and builders of ancient city walls. But the creatures found in the Philippines were so important to local tribes that their members kept skeletal remains of one so-called Cyclops named Agyo, worshipping him in one of the nearby caves. As stories about the mysterious skeleton spread, it caught the attention of experts at the National Museum, who launched an investigation, later confirming they did find a skull with one single eye socket in the forehead. But as the investigation continued and experts dug further into the origin of the skeleton, they concluded that the skull belonged to an ordinary man who had been buried in the cave. The explanation for the single eye socket was an artificial formation of stalagmites, because human bones and limestone have a similar composition. The stalagmites formed on the skull, and the hole was instead the socket of the spinal column. Even though the skull turned out not to be a one-eyed, half-man, half-beast giant with supernatural powers, the skeleton was later reburied, allowing the tribal people to preserve the legacy and continue the worship of their own ancient marvel. Number 7. Bocor Hill Station. Something happened at a posh resort overlooking the Gulf of Thailand, where a once sprawling hotel and casino now sits as a crumbling, abandoned ruin of its former glory. Bocor Hill Station was once a popular destination for French colonists. It was the place to be for Cambodia's elite, who were drawn to the dramatic landscape of Bocor Mountain. The resort was a place to get away from the stifling heat in the valley below, offering sweeping views, royal residences, and spacious terraces for rest and relaxation. Unfortunately, during the 9 months of construction of the resort, an estimated 1,000 workers died. Could those deaths have cursed the resort before it even opened? Many of the guests in its heyday were Europe's rich and famous, who came to the resort for parties, dancing, and music that filtered down into the surrounding jungle below. But after Cambodia gained its independence from the French in 1953, the town was abandoned, with Cambodia's upper class taking over into the golden age in the 1950s and 1960s. The party continued well into the mid-1970s, until the Khmer Rouge, a radical communist movement, used guerrilla tactics to win power and take over the Cambodian countryside, which included the resort. During their reign, the group was responsible for an estimated 2 million deaths. The Khmer Rouge were notoriously violent and soon overran the country. It took an invasion by the Vietnamese in 1978 to take back control from the soldiers, who loved the remote location and used it to hide out in the rugged mountainous landscape. Finally, in the 1990s, the UN forced a ceasefire and Cambodia saw a resurgence of peace. Soon, tourists returned to Bocor Hill Station. Though the buildings, including the giant female Buddha statue, the abandoned church, and the Palace Hotel and Casino, were now aged and weathered, visitors continue to flock there to catch a glimpse of the ruins and imagine what it looked like in all its opulent glory. Some people might wonder why the Cambodian government doesn't renovate or rebuild the resort, but others think leaving it there in all its crumbling glory is the best way to remind residents of the tumultuous past and how peace is a fragile luxury in Cambodia. Would you want to visit these beautiful crumbling ruins? Tell us in the comments. Number 6. Plain of Jars. The next time you're in Southeast Asia looking for a unique cultural landmark to visit, instead of heading to the usual spots in Thailand or Vietnam, take a detour to Laos. There, you'll find a jaw-dropping spot steeped in mystery. Just outside the tiny town of Phon Savan sits thousands of acres of unspoiled, lush greenery. But there's more than meets the eye in the sprawling countryside, something you'll spot the moment you arrive. Scattered across those hillsides sit countless gigantic stone urns, abandoned there thousands of years ago. Some archaeologists think the huge jars were used as a type of coffin where bodies were left to decompose. Some even think the bodies were moved into different urns, depending on which stage of decomposition they were in. Not a job for the faint of heart, that's for sure, but the theory isn't that far-fetched. Local cultural beliefs include the idea that the soul takes time to transition from the earth, needing to go through the decomposition process gradually before being cremated. The only way to uncover the true purpose of the jars is to examine them, but the sight is a dangerous one. During the Vietnam War, the field was a primary dumping ground for US fighter pilots, making it the most bombed area in the world. Even today, an estimated 80 million undetonated bombs are hidden across the plains, making it a treacherous place to visit. The telltale signs of these bombings can be seen on many of the jars that have been damaged or destroyed. Most people are only allowed to view the site from afar, but that hasn't stopped locals from trekking through the fields. Sadly, the journey has been deadly, with tens of thousands of Laotians losing their lives since 1964 while traveling across the field. Of the 100 different sites spread across the plain, only 9 are open to public visitors. Still, the trip is worth it if you want to learn about local history, lore, and the real reason Laotians created the massive stone jars for their dead. Would you travel to Laos to see the plain of jars despite the danger you might face? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our other videos. Number 5. The Hanging Coffins. An ancient rite is alive and well in the Philippines, one that involves a unique burial practice you'll have to see to believe. A group known as the Igorot people hand-carve their own coffins, but when it comes time to say a final goodbye to loved ones, they don't bury them in the ground. Instead, the tribe hangs the coffin from the side of a cliff. The sight is a haunting one, with aged wooden caskets suspended high above the ground below. The rite has been taking place for over 2,000 years, and the belief behind the custom is that the Igorot people are helping their dearly departed be closer to their ancestral spirits. The custom makes for quite a spectacle, one that starts with the elderly carving out their own coffins from local timber. When they are done, they paint their name on the outside of the coffin in preparation for their burials, a process that takes time and isn't like anything you've ever experienced before. After a person dies, their body is placed in a wooden death chair and tied with leaves and vines to keep them in place. That's when the real process begins. The blanket-covered body is smoked over a fire to keep it from rotting, while relatives of the deceased visit to pay their respects and tend to their fire for several days. In the past, coffins were smaller than they are today, which meant family members had the gruesome task of breaking the dead person's bones to fit them inside. Luckily today, the hanging coffins are longer. Once the smoking process is complete, the corpse is wrapped in rattan leaves and placed inside. Then, mourners haul the coffin up the bluff and allow the deceased fluids to drip onto their bodies in the hopes it will bring them good luck. After the grueling procession is complete, villagers use wooden pegs to suspend the coffin from the cliff face, leaving the dead in their final resting place. If you thought you had to travel to the Philippines to see this marvel of burial rites, you can find similar customs in pockets of China and Indonesia. Even though most other places have stopped practicing this rite, the most recent hanging coffin was placed in 2010, allowing the residents of the Philippines to keep their ancient culture alive. Number 4. Buddha Park. For travelers looking for a spiritual awakening, there's no better place to do so than at Buddha Park in Laos. 15 miles east of the city center sits Chiang Kwan, the spirit city, where over 200 statues depicting Buddhist and Hindu figures await discovery. A priest shaman named Luang Pu Bunluela Sulilat, who studied both religions and wanted to honor them with his artwork, created all the statues in the park. With hundreds of other statues, including humans, demons, animals, and mythical creatures, there is something for art lovers of all kinds. The focal point of the park is a pumpkin-shaped sculpture whose demonic figure invites visitors to enter through its mouth and climb 3 stories, representing heaven, earth, and hell. Before reaching the top, for those who brave the trek, they are treated to a bird's-eye view of the entire park. Another stunning sculpture found in the park is of a massive reclining Buddha that stretches 120 meters, almost 400 feet. Buddhas with intricately sculpted bizarre skull-topped hats and gods can be found within the park, all made from concrete. After visiting the park, you can go to Sala Keoku, another similar park nearby, also filled with sculptures by the same artist. Again, Buddha is featured in many of the statues, as well as a 3-story pavilion with artifacts. There's also a massive sculpture of the Wheel of Life with fantastical characters depicting the karmic cycle of birth and death as part of the installation. If you want to get up close and personal with the man behind these fantastical sculptures, Bunluea Sulilat's mummified body is located inside the museum, where some of his followers believe his hair continues to grow even after death. Number 3. The Stone Forest. Most people travel to see things they've never experienced before. For those who want to visit somewhere with magical scenery steeped in mystery, the Stone Forest in Kunming, China is just the place. Home to the Naxi and Yi people, it is a natural phenomenon that formed 270 million years ago when the Yunnan Guizhou Plateau was a vast ocean. The climate then was hot, and there was a lot of rainfall as animals and plants grew and decayed over time. Their skeletons, rich in calcium, deposited on the sea floor and created a thick layer of fossil sediment. Over time, the seabed rose again, raising the hidden laser limestone to over 1,000 meters, 3,280 feet above sea level. It took eons of weathering and erosion from acids and carbons in the atmosphere, where the ditches that form the stunning stone pillars, gates, and pinnacles that make up the forest today separated the rocks. Even locals believed they were living in a fantasy land whose origins were told in the story of a beautiful girl and her star-crossed love. According to their legends, a member of the Yi people, Ashima, was kidnapped by an evil landlord who forced her to marry him. Luckily, her lover, Ahe, rescued her, but it wasn't a happy ending for the pair. On their way home, a massive flood swept Ashima away, turning her into one of the stone pillars in the forest. She's still visited by locals who believe the Ashima rock is a protector of the Sani people even today, with many scenic areas including stunning waterfalls, deep caves, and dazzling lakes. The stone forest, with its oddly shaped stone pillars, create a magical landscape that attracts visitors every year. Number 2. The Hanging Monastery. Imagine attending a service at this hanging monastery in the Shaanxi province of China. A monk named Liao Ran built it 1,500 years ago during the Northern Wei dynasty, 386 to 534. It's suspended 50 meters, 165 feet above the ground at Hangshan Mountain in an incredible display of engineering, where holes were drilled into the cliff side for support beams that the foundation of the pavilions were built on. There are multiple pavilions, all connected via plank roads along the face of the steep cliffs, offering worshippers a dizzying glimpse at the deep valley below. Incredibly, the monastery looks much like it did when it was first built, thanks to the natural overhang that protects it from flooding and runoff erosion that would have weathered any other structure. Its location between Guiping Peak and Tianfang Peak also means the monastery is protected from wind erosion. If you thought that was unique, the monastery also has the distinction of being the only monastery in China that houses Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism all under one roof. To celebrate each of the religions, over 80 bronze, iron, terracotta, and stone statues are collected inside, including side-by-side sculptures of Lao Zi, Confucius, and Shakyamuni, the founders of the three main religions of China. This unique aspect of the monastery came about when travelers stopped at the remote location to rest, with so many looking for a place to worship, but reluctant to do so at a place where another religion was practiced. The monastery adopted all three religions, so more travelers felt comfortable staying and praying there. With both the north and south pavilions, the long bridge with a hall for worshipping statues and sculptures, it's a stunning haven for visitors who want to get closer to nature when honoring their chosen god. Number 1. The Rainbow Mountains. One look at the Zhangye National Geopark in the northern foothills of China's Krilan Mountains, and you'll definitely do a double take. The mountain sides look like something you'd see in a pop art painting. Vibrant splashes of bright orange, blue, yellow, and red decorate the peaks and valleys of the mountain range that stands over 100 meters tall in places. Formed over 24 million years ago, the mountains get their colorful hue from sandstone deposits, iron and trace minerals, and erosion. As tectonic plates shifted, they created the mountainous peaks and rolling hills, with wind and rain sculpting them into towers, pillars, and ravines. But how did they get their color? About 55 million years ago, the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate, folding a landscape of flat sandstone, lifting the mountains and exposing sedimentary rocks hidden below the surface. Weathering and erosion swept away the top layers of rocks, exposing the underlying formations made up of different combinations of minerals and chemicals. As the land reacted to local conditions, it allowed the true colors of the underlying rocks to shine through, giving the Rainbow Mountains their distinct colors. If you plan to take a visit to the Zhangye National Geopark, the best time to take in the natural masterpiece is between June and September at sunrise or sunset. The largest part of the park is the Linjie Dangjia Scenic Area, but there's also an area where the formations look like melting ice sculptures. If you thought you had to travel to the other side of the world to see the natural wonder, look down at your feet. If you find a rust-colored stone, there's a good chance you've identified a piece of sandstone stained with iron oxide, the same process that created the Rainbow Mountains. And if one day you're able to travel to China's Hulian Mountains, you'll feel like you've just stepped into an art gallery. That's the Earth's way of showcasing just how beautiful nature can be. Thanks for watching. Which one of these locations did you think is the strangest? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!